Hi everybody and welcome to the Kidney Coach YouTube channel. I am naturopath Fiona Chin, co-founder of Kidney Coach and Kaigenesis, a range of supplements designed for those diagnosed with chronic kidney disease. Whether you've got a low eGFR or high creatinine, we might have a supplement or a product for you. And I'm joined again today by the wonderful, the fabulous, the ever so lovely Lindsey Zirker. Lindsey is a renal dietitian. She's part of the team at Kidney Nutritional Institute. She's an all-round genius, published author, and all things dialysis expert related. She worked in the dialysis units for a very long time, and really where you came to light about there has to be a better way, right, Lindsey? That was due to dialysis. Yeah. She's been in the chronic kidney disease world for a long time. She's also quite an expert on all the autoimmune drivers of kidney disease as well. And if you've been following along on our YouTube channel, you know that Lindsey and I are working our way through the hormones and their relationship to chronic kidney disease and trying to give you as much information and what you need to know about certain hormones and chronic kidney disease. And today, we did testosterone last time. Today we are talking about, as ladies, we're talking about estrogen and progesterone. So Lindsey, I'm going to hand it across to you to discuss all things hormones and chronic kidney disease and women and what they need to know and their relationships to hormones. Go! No pressure.
All right, so primarily talking about estrogen and progesterone today. So obviously, like last time, we've heard about these before, but maybe kind of thinking through what do these actually do? What happens if they're high or low? And what's the impact on kidney disease? And what can we do about it? Hopefully, that's what we get out of it today. So estrogen and progesterone, they are the primary female sex hormones, but also present in men at lower levels. In women, they're primarily produced by the ovaries, but also lesser extent by the adrenal glands and fat tissue. Mm-hmm. In men, small amounts are produced by the testes, and then there's peripheral conversion of the other hormones as well. So estrogen is actually a group of hormones: estradiol, estrone, and estriol. I don't know. Sometimes I think I make up how I say these things.
No, that's exactly, that's how I say them. Or E1, E2, E3 for the E's.
Yeah. So, so estrogen is obviously really important for reproductive system and secondary sexual characteristics in women. So it regulates the menstrual cycle and stimulates growth of the uterine lining, supports ovulation. It helps protect against bone loss by reducing bone resorption. It has a pretty positive impact on heart and vascular health, helps improve lipid profiles, like increasing HDL, lowering LDL, helps with vascular flexibility, and is also anti-inflammatory. I didn't go down that exact rabbit hole, but I thought that looked interesting. Shockingly, no one is going to be surprised here. It also affects your brain, like your mood, your cognition, and also neuroprotection. Really important for skin and connective tissue because it helps promote collagen production and like the hydration of your skin. And also plays a pretty important role with metabolism because of its role with insulin sensitivity and fat distribution. Higher amounts of insulin or higher amounts of estrogen mean more fat on the hips and thighs. So we're supposed to have hips and thighs. That's how it goes, apparently. So yeah, that's estrogen. Should I move on to progesterone, or do we want to talk about anything?
I don't think so. We'll get to the curly stuff around it, but yeah. So that's all things estrogen for the Americans, and then progesterone.
So progesterone helps with balancing estrogen, so prevents overstimulation of the uterine lining, helps modulate estrogen's growth promoting effects. It's really supportive for pregnancy. Again, preparing the uterine lining for implantation maintains early pregnancy. Important for the nervous system. It has a calming, sleep promoting, again, more neuroprotective effects. It's looking at the GABA receptor activity there. It has thermogenic effects, slightly raises body temperature post-ovulation, and also supports breast development and the elasticity of skin. It also has metabolic impact, musculoskeletal impact, and so helps support bone health, um, can help reduce muscle pain, helps lower blood pressure, and reduce the risk of blood clots, um, and it can increase appetite and promote weight gain, especially during pregnancy. And it also has an impact on the immune system, anti-inflammatory and immunosuppressant effects, which, depending on what you're needing, could be helpful. Anything I
Exactly.
missed in that whole giant list of all these crazy things that hormones do?
No, I think they're all the big main things. And again, you and I have talked about this. It's the orchestra of the hormones that's super important. So
Yes.
while they, as a single thing, sound great, people probably know at the beginning of the cycle, estrogen's the predominant player. Then when we move into that's the follicular, well, I guess I'll let you speak about this. That's the follicle
No,
stimulating
you do
phase.
it.
And then we move on to the luteinizing phase, and that's progesterone. That's where it's really stimulating the growth lining ready for implantation. That's triggered. So you get, I guess we have to probably quickly talk about luteinizing and follicle stimulating hormones. So beginning of your cycle, please correct me if I get this wrong, Lindsay, because I'm going off the top of my head, but it's a surge of follicle stimulating hormone. You get a follicle starting to grow. As that's happening, you get a nice fluctuation of estrogen. As the estrogen levels start to drop, and then that is due to the follicle being released. That is what stimulates progesterone, and that also gives a feedback loop from luteinizing hormone. So follicle stimulating levels will drop off. Luteinizing hormone comes up, you'll get progesterone then being the major player in that last half of the cycle. That is thickening the endometrial lining, getting the endometrial lining ready for egg implantation. Then when the egg implantation doesn't happen, that will stimulate the lining to shed, which is your period. That is what happens. So you've got luteinizing hormone, follicle stimulating hormone, estrogen, the three estrogens, E1, E2, E3. You can go back to the beginning of this to remember what they are. And then progesterone. They're your big, and of course there are other things that play a role in that, but they are your major orchestra players when it comes to your hormone cycle and what should happen for women in their menstrual cycles. But Lindsay, does that happen every month for women?
Yeah. Some people just have lovely, delightful cycles, and it's not super disruptive to their life. But I feel like for the most part, um, I don't know. I feel like for myself and lots of other people that I talk to, like every month it's like, I feel insane. I think I've just gained a bunch of weight. I can't remember anything. What's going on with me? I want to kill everyone. I want to cry all the time. Like there's all these weird things, and we're like, am I going crazy? And then, oh, gonna start my period soon. Okay. And I feel like, there's varying degrees and different symptoms, but I feel like that's a pretty common thing for most women. And I think that we think that that's how it's supposed to be. And that's just like the curse that we have been given. And we feel crazy and horrible for like 2 weeks out of every month. But apparently, that's not really how it's designed to be.
No, and look, I will put my hand up and confess I'm one of these very annoying people that mood just does this the entire cycle. I want to stab people every day, Lindsay, so it's no regular thing that's going
You're
on.
like, I cannot blame this on hormones.
I can't
I
believe this
know.
almost. No, mine's a regular 27, 28-day cycle. It's the same bleed every time. I don't get any blood clots, no pain, no cramping, no headaches. My breasts do, they get a little bigger, it's great. And then they go back down to their regular size, a bit boring. That's as exciting as my hormone cycle is. And so it's always fascinating to me when a patient comes in and they're like, this happens to me. And I'm like, just never ever had an experience like I've never had a painful period ever in my life. I've never clotted, never flooded, never. So for every woman out there that wants to stab me, I understand. I have an autoimmune disease, so I'm balanced that way, right? So this is my trade-off in life. That I
We
have
all
no
have
hormones.
something, right? Yeah.
I have to win at something in my life. But my point is that no, there are as unicorns out there that just have these normal cycles, and there's just no effect. And so, yeah, it doesn't have to be this crazy roller coaster ride that you go on every month. And to my point, I don't think it's meant to be like that every month.
Yeah.
So if it's not like that, then what do we need to look at? And we can go down the rabbit hole. We obviously want to tie it into how this relates to kidney disease, because there are massive ties between hormones and kidney disease. And I think, probably the other thing, because of the age of people getting kidney disease, it's a later thing. So it's linked to menopause, estrogen decline, and maybe we can talk a little bit about perimenopause, because that's got so much media. Well, it might just be my age too, because I'm in that age group, and it might just be my Instagram feed that just bombs
Mine
me.
has been blowing up. And so then my sisters and I talk about it, and then we send
Yeah.
each other memes, and then it blows up even more, and I can't even escape them now. So,
Yeah, it's the same. I'm like, Instagram's decided I'm 45, and so I must be perimenopause, and therefore I must watch every meme and piece of research about it. I'm like, darn you, Instagram. So, but it does mean that from Instagram, I'm very well educated on perimenopause. But
that's how I'm feeling. Well, I feel like perimenopause really, like, I, again, maybe it's just because of my social media feeds. I don't feel like I've ever really heard it talked about until like this past year.
no, and I really want to shout out to Mary Claire Harver and Kelly Capperson for their amazing work. Mary Claire Harver's got the book, The New Menopause. So for anyone that's perimenopausal or going through menopause, I really highly recommend that you read that book. Kelly Capperson's got a book too, and I'm sorry, Kelly, I can't remember it right now. She's a trained urologist, but Kelly was in Washington State really lobbying hard to get testosterone approved by the FDA for women on insurance. So it was something there. So between those two women, I feel like I've got a really good education, and I have watched all their lectures and gone and read their books. And, they're really paving the way to give women a voice when it comes to all things perimenopause. So I have to shout out to them. If anyone wants really good material, those two women are the creme de la creme when it comes to perimenopause, hormones, and postmenopause. So shout out where it's worth. But let's take a step back. So first off, before we move through perimenopause and menopause, let's just talk about the regular hormone cycle. Women, when they're starting menstruation and all the way up, we said that it shouldn't be abnormal. What are the things that, let's look at the big ticket items, because we will dig into more kidney disease for this. But what are the big ticket items that can go wrong in hormonal cycles and imbalances for women, and just some things that people should look out for and test, or they should be aware of, Lindsay?
So looking at things that might cause low estrogen or progesterone or high, and then testing, is that what you're
Yeah,
looking
just
for?
just
Okay.
the big key things that,
Yeah.
if women are feeling like psychopaths about their cycle, that maybe they should look into.
One that is, I feel like, really important that ties back to kidney disease really well is thyroid dysfunction, because that can cause things to be super wacky. Definitely can actually send people into early menopause if it's severe enough. Um, and because we know that thyroid disease has a negative impact on the kidneys, and kidneys have a negative impact on the thyroid, that it just seems like that's an extra good thing to check out. And then if you're a woman on top of it and feeling like maybe my hormones are kind of weird, I mean, thyroid is pretty bossy. It's even gonna boss around estrogen. So, you know. So that's a big one I think to look at. I feel like the common ones that I remember from hearing from school all the time was like really low body fat, female athletes, right? That's a struggle, contributing to low estrogen levels. but also chronic stress that was never talked about when I was in school, which apparently was
Mm.
like 100 years ago, because elevated cortisol suppresses reproductive hormones. Apparently, you're too stressed to try and give birth, so it doesn't want you to do that.
Yep.
But strangely, chronic stress can also cause high estrogen, so it doesn't really always work that well. Um, but poor liver detoxification or sluggish bile flow that can cause high estrogen or estrogen dominance. Um, Quite a wide variety of different types of toxins or endocrine disruptors. They can cause higher estrogen levels. High body fat because adipose tissue is actually its own endocrine organ, which is why
Mm.
so many things are weird when there's more fat tissue. And insulin resistance or PCOS, those are going to cause higher estrogen levels.
And we know insulin resistance and that whole metabolic picture is
Yeah.
tied into kidney disease. So definitely
Yes.
PCOS is something that can be, 20 years ahead of a chronic kidney disease due to the insulin resistance that goes with it, and then type 2 diabetes. So definitely something to be
Mhm.
aware of if you've got PCOS. Do you want to give a quick overview of what happens in PCOS, and then let's move into the perimenopause phase?
Yeah, PCOS. So PCOS is, I feel like shockingly still tricky to get diagnosed.
Mm.
Um, and because, well, I don't know, maybe it's just because everything is just like, oh, that's just your hormones and it's weird. So, but basically, you have insulin resistance that can lead to luteinizing hormone secretion being increased, and this stimulates more androgen production in the ovaries. And these androgens can promote cyst development on the ovaries, and that's when we get some of the more visible symptoms like hairism and acne, things like that. But it also causes a dysregulation. I feel like everything is an axis now. The
Yeah.
hypothalamic pituitary ovarian axis dysfunction.
Yep.
So, and this leads to irregular ovulation and more increased luteinizing hormone levels. And then there's the oxidative stress and mitochondrial dysfunction that goes along with the whole metabolic soup and insulin resistance. And then that just kind of, further snowballs more impaired ovarian function, increased androgen production, and worsening insulin resistance. And so then we have people who are experiencing fertility issues and weight loss resistance and, you know, just a really sad soup of symptoms there. Any other points you're wanting to hit on with that?
No, I think they're the big ones. That one's probably the biggest one tied to, or that we see, long term can be tied into kidney disease. I think and elevated estrogen's the other sort of big one. You don't generally see elevated progesterone so much, generally due to endocrine disruptors and environments, but high estrogen and then your high androgens and insulin resistance and that whole
Mhm.
thing. PCOS are going to be your sort of main ones that at least I see in clinical practice. Then we move into the perimenopause, and it never used to be a thing, was it? We sort of just, pre all of these amazing women bringing out so much research was we just menstruated and then we'd go through menopause, stop, get some hot flushes, deal with it, and then off you go. And then that's, obviously not the way that it goes now. We now understand that perimenopause, meaning basically complete ovarian dysregulation and hormone dysregulation, can start in the 40s. And you may not even be symptomatic. You may still be regulating or menstruating quite regularly. And it's very hard to track because hormones generally in that 40 to 50 range start going all over the place. So you might run even a Dutch test, you might run it 1 month. And I
Mhm.
know this with my patients. I run it 1 month and it looks one way, and you run it another month and it's completely different. So one of the things that I really picked up from Dr. Mary Claire Harver was that the biggest test, and I've been doing this now for about 3 to 6 months, is you'll get this slow increase in cholesterol levels and this slow dumping of vitamin D. And we know the link between vitamin D and chronic kidney disease, right? So, and in testing, that is exactly what I see in my 40 to 50-year-old women who might say, and they might have the perimenopausal symptoms of, my joints have gotten a bit stiff. I can't remember why I went into the bedroom. My husband's snoring is really far more annoying than it's ever been. And if he chews in my ear one more time, I'm going to put a pencil through his eyeball. But I'm not perimenopausal because I've got no hot flushes, right? But they're like joint pain, stabbing of husbands, and my sleep's disruptive. Like I just can't sleep anymore. And now we know that can be very due to this perimenopausal hormone dysymphony that's going on. And definitely, on blood testing, yes, you see these creeping lipid levels and these declining vitamin D. So I might hand it across to you to explain why that might happen, and then it's time to kidney disease and all those other bits and pieces.
Yeah, I think that sometimes it really is hard to know just because there are so many things that cause hormone disruption and imbalance. So how do you know if it's just like messed up hormones or if you really are entering perimenopause phase?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I think that's a big challenge, but I feel really happy that it's being more recognized. I was talking to a patient of mine who she was also a dietitian. She worked more in cardiac health and she was in that menopausal phase, and she was just like, if this happened to men, I'm pretty sure that this would have gotten figured out a long time ago. And I think that it's not because like men are really horrible doctors. Like there's so many really amazing doctors, but when you aren't living with the insanity that is all these crazy hormones, like I feel like there's just so many times you just like as women you're getting in survival mode, and as a man you're just like that's just how women are. They're just kind of
Mm-hmm.
insane sometimes. And so now that you know, more and more women are, getting into the research and, sharing their clinical insights and stuff. I think honestly that is why we're hearing more about perimenopause is because, women are like, hey, I've been looking at these things and guess what I found out and sharing, their insights and experiences. Um, but I do think that, you know, it's kind of like, I don't know, it feels like to me it's like reverse puberty um, when we're entering in those phases. And so we get all these weird symptoms and stuff because we are having these fundamental hormone shifts. And depending on where your baseline is at, I think is going to impact on how significant those shifts are. Um, but I do think, overall, generally speaking, that, as we've talked about with all the other hormones, if you're doing those baseline things to support hormone balance, then those changes and symptoms are going to be less drastic. But it's difficult, like you said, if you have kidney disease and PCOS and an autoimmune disease and anemia, and you have, things to focus on like work and relationships and somehow feeding yourself, then it's a lot to try and manage. So um, I think that to be honest, one of the biggest things that is going to be helpful is checking in with yourself and paying attention to how you're feeling, what's going on. I do find it strange though that the chewing is such a consistent symptom of like chewing irritation. It's like the thing that comes across. I was like, that's oddly specific.
It really
So
is still my baby. My husband chews in such a way. My children chew in such a way. I'm like, it's just hilarious. Yes, it is a very common symptom. That's the symptom of perimenopause. But
yeah, that's a pathophysiology piece that I don't know if we'll ever really figure out.
no, but I love it. It's so funny. um, so, and it's interesting too because We do, a lot of women in my kidney mastery group will talk about their kidney decline started in perimenopause, menopause, which I find really fascinating. Did you want to speak to why that potentially is the case? And I think also we definitely need to talk for anyone that's been diagnosed with an autoimmune driven kidney disease, be that lupus or IgA nephropathy or any of those real autoimmune pieces, why hormones become really even more, because we definitely know that hormones and autoimmunity are heavily related. I'm obviously very interested in that piece with my self having MS and my MS patients and things like that, and I do notice that, but I think if anyone's listening and they're in that time of life where they've got a family history of chronic kidney disease, or and I notice in my women, that you start to get these 90-80 fluctuation EGFRs. I don't know if you've noticed that, but I definitely see that when I'm screening my normal patients that don't have kidney disease and they get to their 40s in perimenopause, and I start to see, and I would call that probably early tubule damage before we're seeing massive changes in protein leakage and bun levels going up. But you do start to see these, especially my insulin resistant patients. So I find all of that, and autoimmune patients, I find that super interesting. Do you want to explain that mechanism for people and why people maybe with those histories or family histories should be paying a bit more attention to that?
Yeah, so yeah, looking at how does CKD impact the hormones and how do the hormones impact CKD. So, generally speaking, kidney disease can cause ovarian dysfunction because it does disrupt that axis that I mentioned earlier, the hypothalamus pituitary gonadal axis. I feel like those uremic toxins, we're not really fully understanding the full breadth of the havoc that they wreak on systems. But like one of the basics things is that um, toxins sit in hormone receptor sites. And so anytime that happens, like it's not like all types of toxins will sit in all types of receptor sites. So I feel like that makes it more challenging to understand. But that's one reason why kidney disease causes that problem. But also the kidney's ability to help regulate sex hormones is impaired. And so um, that makes it difficult because we have different clearance levels of the different hormones. Um, can have typically it's lower estrogen and progesterone levels that occur. Um, and when we think back about what does estrogen do, well, it's helping with metabolism and insulin sensitivity and progesterone with appetite, right? And so this is, a problem. And the anti-inflammatory piece that occurs, that's apparently pretty important because in kidney disease, that drop in insulin or the drop in estrogen and progesterone does increase inflammation, and could potentially lead to more malnutrition because you have uremic toxin overload, maybe more gut issues, and you're getting not as much appetite. And I feel like not to pull in too many hormones here, but there's also a lot of dopamine receptors on your kidneys that deal with the food reward kind of feedback loop, and that gets down regulated in kidney disease as well. And so lots of things like impacting appetite negatively. Um, and then, yeah, the fatigue, sleep disturbance, depression, all these things, they're just going to have an overall negative impact on, I feel like, anyone's ability to really do diet and lifestyle changes when it comes to general health. Like your physical activity is probably also going to drop. You remembering to take your pills. Did I take it? Did I not? Oh, it's 2 days ago. I didn't even think about taking those pills. Like, there's a lot of those things that kind of go along, so I feel like they kind of pile up. Um, do do do. Blood pressure regulation. So estrogen does typically help. It can help manage that blood pressure better. Um, Looking specifically at two pathways, the renin-angiotensin system and also nitric oxide levels. And so estrogen helps with the vascular function piece. And then we have the mineral metabolism, which we know that's a big deal. So I think that's why we're seeing the vitamin D piece keen in, because it helps with that calcium and phosphorus metabolism.
Yeah.
Um, and so, I mean, who knows how estrogen is tying in with FGF23 and clotho? That's another rabbit hole to go down.
It's a big rabbit hole, and I haven't seen. I actually went and had a look to see if anyone had gone down that rabbit hole, and I haven't seen anyone properly go down that. I mean, it makes sense that we're seeing a decline in vitamin D, that we're going to see a rock in the FGF23 clotho pathway because of that. And I think I understand very crudely the mechanism between the lipids going up because your body's trying to produce more cholesterol to make more hormones. That makes sense to me because
Yes.
cholesterol
Hmm.
is, and we've talked about that when we talked about cholesterol. You talked about that when we talked about cholesterol, that cholesterol's needed to make hormones. So it makes sense to me that as you get a hormonal decline in perimenopause, your body is going to go, I have to make more of the cofactors to try and do this. That it's preserving
Yeah.
itself. That makes complete sense to me. Why vitamin D goes down, and you probably know this, I assume vitamin D is such a huge mechanism in the conversion of cholesterol into hormones that you are burning through more of your vitamin D stores, or that also because cholesterol has been shunted to, actually no, it would be this one. It's because cholesterol has been shunted towards hormone production rather than vitamin D synthesis and conversion. You're starting to get less because the body has prioritized hormones, because that for it is far more important to its survival than vitamin D. It'd be that. That's why, isn't it? That would make sense. Tell me if I'm wrong, but that's what
I
makes
feel like
sense to me.
I feel like it's a combination. I mean,
Yeah.
vitamin D, it's like all over. It's
Yeah.
it's doing all kinds of things. So I think that, the priority shifts. But estrogen also stimulates vitamin D metabolism. And so
It's great.
that's a piece there. And then the kidneys, the vitamin D activation is, a piece. Um, and also intestinal absorption apparently declines with age. Like
Okay.
I I don't know. But then also changes in body composition because of the increase in fat, and because vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin, and your fat says, hello, we're an endocrine organ. We're going to take that vitamin D now. And then it's not available for anything else.
Yeah. Bye bye.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a piece like if you're seeing more weight gain, but um yeah, I feel like there's probably all kinds of things that we haven't even discovered yet, but I feel like a combination of lots of factors is contributing to that.
Yeah, no, you're right, and it's so fascinating. So that's just perimenopause. Now let's move gear into menopause. So we've hot flushed our way out. We're out the other end. We're postmenopause, and we've decided not to do hormone replacement therapy. Why do we see, and we do see, what's the link between estrogen decline and kidney disease? Because there's quite a lot of literature on this. So for anyone that doesn't know that, and I feel like there's a generation of women in front of us, Lindsay, that, are that have gone through menopause and out the other end. So I've got a lot of girlfriends in their mid-50s. They're of the age where HRT was still cancer causing. We know those studies were, that one big one study that did it was pretty faulty and it's been debunked now, but that have not had HRT. What are the things that we need to look out for with estrogen decline and its linked to kidney disease that people may not know about?
So some of them we kind of touched on a little bit with like the blood pressure piece. So it helps control blood pressure and fluid balance. The fluid balance piece should not be a surprise because we feel all like puffy when things are a little too wild. Um, so yeah, so that blood pressure piece, and then like I mentioned earlier with the nitric oxide production, which helps with vasodilation, and that helps reduce oxidative stress and inflammation. So if estrogen declines, then those kind of protective pieces are weaker. So the kidney is actually more vulnerable to injury. And I think if there's already been some assaults, then that's a big deal because one of the things that I didn't know, and I didn't go down this rabbit hole, but estrogen actually does play a role in kidney repair and regeneration processes.
It
And
does.
so, yeah, so that's a pretty big deal. Um, but there is, again, this direct link between lower endogenous estrogen exposure and then the higher risk of CKD. So there's a lot steeper decline um, in GFR in postmenopausal women compared to premenopausal women. So,
And I think there were studies too showing that if someone had had an early hysterectomy without hormone replacement, that they are a much higher risk of developing CKD earlier, with
mhm,
worsening progression. So I found that really interesting too, that there is a much bigger correlation between estrogen and kidney health, and probably down to the, part of it being that repair mechanism that we might not completely understand. And we
mhm,
know that estrogen is very protective to the cardiovascular system, and
yeah.
and you spoke, in detail that the biggest risk for anyone with CKD is actually it's the cardiovascular events that we have to look out for. They're the things that will cause more issues that we don't want in our CKD patient groups.
Mhm.
So we know that estrogen is going to reduce all of that. So they're covering the big things. So I guess the big question for anyone listening to this, especially if they're a bit older, is if we have CKD, should we be considering and talking to someone about hormone replacement therapy? Should we be doing it naturally? If we're replacing hormones, are we just doing estrogen because that's where all the research is? Tell me more. What do I need to know, Lindsay?
Well, I'm a big fan of using what works. So, like,
Fancy.
in that's that's the goal. I feel like sometimes the reason I say it that way is just because sometimes it's easy to kind of pigeonhole ourselves in like, oh, I don't believe in alternative medicine. I'm gonna just stick with the conventional medicine route. Or conventional medicine just as a band-aid, I'm gonna go the functional medicine route. Or I want to go Eastern medicine route. Or I want to do some weird witchcraft in the forest route. Like, I feel like, sometimes we think we have to pick a lane, and I feel like, no, the whole highway is yours. Like, find what works and then use that.
Yes.
And and so it goes back to one of my favorite things that I do in a lot of my courses is I show this slide about what evidence-based medicine actually is. Because a lot of times, again, we get stuck on, well, there's no systematic review of randomized placebo-controlled trial shenanigans. So that means there's no evidence for that sort of therapy. So sorry. But that is not what evidence is, and that is not what evidence decision making looks like. It is that type of that whole long thing I just said, those randomized meta-analysis, systematic reviews, all those kind of things. That's really high level of evidence, which means, yep, the outcomes are more predictable. Seems more likely this is going to happen. But there's a whole bunch of layers to evidence, with the bottom level of evidence being clinical experience. And and so I feel like that's really important for providers to remember, because when we actually go and look at the studies for a lot of stuff, I feel like for nutrition and kidney disease, there's really not very good evidence for a lot of it. I mean, my favorite one to harp on was potassium and kidney disease.
Yeah, oh my goodness, you and me both.
When the KDOKI guidelines came out and they said we couldn't find any clinical studies that looked at how does dietary potassium intake impact serum potassium levels, and I was like, what? If anyone knows
We've,
anything about a kidney diet, it's that you restrict potassium. And
yeah,
come
we've
to
been
find
cutting it
out,
out for years.
there's actually no
No evidence.
clinical trial evidence. And
No,
so there is clinical experience evidence. I've seen it myself.
of
But
course.
for that high level of evidence that like most like organizations, guidelines and everything that they hold things to, There's no evidence like that for potassium. And I just feel like if we're going to do an evidence-based approach, like we got to hold stuff to the same standard. And so if you are looking at a provider who does an evidence-based approach, like you picture a square and one corner is evidence with the variety of layers. Another layer is the patient's health values. That has to be taken into consideration.
Mhm.
And then we have the provider's health values,
Mhm.
because you want to ethically feel like you're not,
Yes.
compromising yourself, but you also don't want to be ethically compromising your patient. And then you have to look at the resources available to that patient.
Yeah,
And
very.
then overlaying all of that is your own clinical judgment as a provider. That's how you make an evidence-based decision. And so, thinking about my long-winded tangent about hormone replacement therapy, I feel like I feel like if things are super wild and you have turned into a crazy dragon lady, then kind of like we talked about earlier, like for some people, seed cycling is like a game changer for them. But I think that if things have gotten so off base as to turn you into another type of creature, that you might need something that is going to, help you, that's going to be a little bit stronger and help you out. And I'm going to let you speak to, the hormone replacement therapy piece because you do that in clinical practice a fair amount.
You just want me to
So.
say what I said off camera about seed cycling.
Well, I mean, that's why I like went into the whole long thing because there's this huge gamut of what kind of things can help balance hormones.
There
And
really is.
I feel like the hormone replacement therapy, like that is like a super big like conventional piece. And then in between there and like, going out on full moon walks by the ocean, whatever. Like there's a whole
Sesame
range of
seeds.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a whole range of things that can help. And I feel like, we gotta be open to things, but I think um, we don't want to say, well, let's try this thing because it is more natural. Like having something just be more natural, it's not a good evidence-based approach. It's not a complete picture approach for choosing that. There's nothing wrong with wanting natural, but saying, I'm going to do this because it's natural over everything else, you are probably going to sell yourself short with results. Um, and so, like, look at the whole picture of things. So, okay, now back to you for
No,
hormone
and it's a
replacement
really good
therapy.
point because you're talking to a naturopath who is naturally very natural based. And,
Yeah.
originally I was very brainwashed by those hormone replacement studies that came out. And so, was I anti hormone replacement? I was very indoctrinated, like most people were, that hormone replacement would increase your risk of cancer. And again, these amazing researchers that have brought everything out and really debunked it. And I like to say that my personality is flexible enough that if new research comes across and it's presented in such a way that I'm like, I really have to see if I was wrong about that. And I was wrong about hormone replacement therapy. Like a lot of people, I was indoctrinated into thinking it would cause cancer, especially breast cancer. And the research now has really debunked that. And so I've gone from a naturopath even just 5 years ago where if people were talking about hormone replacement, I was like, no, there's other ways we can do it. We can look at herbs. Maybe this whole menopause thing is a natural thing that we meant to go through as women. My mum, got through it with, made no major issues. She's osteoporotic and heaven forbid she falls over and breaks a hip. But, and now looking at this new sort of research into all the benefits of hormone replacement therapy. I do pride myself as being a very flexible thinker. You and I talk about this and the curiosity piece. I think you and I are both very wired that way. So I've spent a lot of time. Instagram is to blame for a lot of this stuff of going down the research of a lot of these women. And I'm like, wow, I really had this wrong. So I had to rethink my clinical practice. I see a lot of women with autoimmune diseases, and just looking at the research and the link between autoimmunity and what happens in perimenopause. And I was having patients where their symptoms were blowing sideways and they were getting a lot worse, and herbs were not reining these women back in. And so I can't prescribe hormone replacement, but I have an amazing doctor I've worked with for 20 years. And he's conservative as well. And he and I will weigh up the research for each patient. I was telling you the patient right before we jumped on this podcast who was here. And, MS, 4 children. She's younger than us. And so, but she is bridging that gap of perimenopause. And she's got the classic slight rise in cholesterol, decrease in vitamin D. Still regular cycle. Would you say she's perimenopausal? My GP needed a bit of convincing. We did run some hormones, and her estrogen and testosterone were both low. And she gets worse in the luteal phase. And so we were like, right. So my beautiful GP, we decided to try her on some progesterone. And we put some estrogen in there as well. And her symptoms, MS, she'd have an MS flare every time she went into the luteal phase, is gone. So, and that's putting hormone replacement therapy in there. So I'm like, I did get that wrong. And so looking at and then the other big thing that I'm seeing in these perimenopausal women is putting in testosterone, which, Kelly Capperson talks a lot about that, the changes that I'm seeing in personality, and women who lost all their drive for life. Libidos have gone out the window, zero care factor, kind of want to get divorced. These were quite successful women. They're really miserable. You put them on, and in Australia, we're one of the few countries where Androfem, which is a topical testosterone, so you're not injecting, it's not testosterone cyprinate or anything like that. It's a 1% androgen cream. It's very low dose. But you put that in, and women are like their lives go back to having color in it, and they get drive again to do things. These women will suddenly start going to the gym where they couldn't be bothered doing that before. And so I feel like that's only a good thing, because then they're picking up better lifestyle choices, which are going to help their overall health. They would talk about their brain coming back online, the fact that they can think. We didn't talk about this, but we know that in estrogen's brain protective, why so many women feel like they're depressed or losing their minds, is that estrogen regulates glucose metabolism throughout the brain. When you take estrogen levels offline, or they decline, your brain starts to cannibalize itself because of the way that glucose metabolisms change inside the brain. I'm working with people with MS, Parkinson's. The last thing I want is for these big neurological changes in a brain that's already potentially damaged. So putting estrogen back into these patients, they get their memory back, their cognition, which was always blamed on the disease they had. That's part of having Parkinson's. That's part of having MS. No, you know what? It wasn't. It was they were perimenopausal, but not overt with hot flushes and things like that. And again, testing won't show this. It's a trial and error. Again, I see that elevated cholesterol, decline in vitamin D. I have a very good GP that will work with me, and just looking at the work of Dr. Mary Claire Harver and Kelly Capperson, and just being curious to go, well, these patients seem to get worse in particular parts of their menstrual cycle. It did get worse in their, mid-40s. Let's just put some stuff online in low dose and try it. And these patients are coming back going, what I thought was my autoimmune disease, especially joint pain in my MS patients. And I put myself on very low dose Androfem. I've put all the hormones in because I'm mid-40s and I have an autoimmune disease. I had chronic joint pain and upper body pain, and I've got pain all over the place from a spinal cord injury. I put it down to MS. As soon as I put in progesterone and testosterone, guess what? Pain gone. In the upper body, joint pain disappeared within 2 days. I was like, that wasn't MS at all. And the feedback I keep hearing from my patients were, we thought it was the disease. Brain fog, all of those things. You put hormones in online in these perimenopausal women, and they get a huge percentage of their life back. And you've got to remember that when you already have an autoimmune disease, you can't think, getting out of bed's already hard, being motivated, all those things. And you add perimenopause on top of that. These women are already miserable. Now they want to stab their husbands even more. They're anxious. All of these things that they were told were their disease, and you take that away, you maybe have made their MS flares a little better. You haven't cured them or anything like that, but you give them quality back. wait, did I have the hormone piece wrong? So I'm very pro hormone replacement therapy now. And a lot of it is, especially now perimenopausal women, it's trial and error because the test, you cannot track hormones going all over the place. You sort of just have to be very good at clinical picture stuff, getting a good idea. I mean, I've known these patients generally for a long time. I'm going to have a long case history. And like I say, I've got a very good team of doctors that I work with in Sydney that are quite pro hormone replacement, and a great doctor here. And we just try it. We start low, we go slow, and we see where we land. But I've been blown away by the improvements that I've had by putting that stuff on board for my autoimmune patients. So, and interestingly, side effect note, these jumping EGFRs that I do see, like they'll fluctuate from high 70s into the 90s. They change every reading. It's so fascinating. They level back out into the 90s as soon as you put hormones back on board as well, which I think comes down to your point about insulin and things like that. So that's my experience.
That's such a great example, again, of looking at the different tiers of evidence and clinical experience being so valid for helping to drive clinical decisions when the research hasn't really quite caught up with things yet. And I feel like that's how good research begins, is we see something's going on here. And to be honest, though, I feel like it's weird when, because I was looking up, women make up 78% of people who have autoimmune disease.
Hmm?
How do we not think that estrogen or progesterone plays a role with that? Like,
Yeah.
how can it not?
Well,
And
you know
that's
what
where,
blew my brain? You probably knew this. I didn't know this, but all research done in that never accounted for female hormones right up until, like, it was very recently. They never accounted for the female fluctuation. Like, women haven't really been included in the research groups as far as their hormones go. They're in the research, but no one goes, let's look at the, like, that's only like really recent. I was like, are we serious? Like, we've just never measured that. Like, oh my goodness, this is embarrassing.
well, to be honest, I feel like research has kind of had a similar approach to me. It's like, that's so like hard and weird to figure out. Can we figure out other stuff first? But that's really not a good approach because it's so impactful. And again, now that I think again, like kind of to your point of what conscious shift, it's like I'm not getting as good of results as I thought I would. So what am I missing here?
Mhm.
And now again, like we've had decades and decades of research on, these very different aspects, from, metabolic disease and autoimmune and kidney and heart health and bone disease and all the stuff. And everyone's going, I think there's a puzzle piece missing. And I think everyone's kind of coming to that conclusion. It's like conclusion of, I guess we really are going to have to take a look at these hormones. And I think as, we are getting a better look at them, that, yeah, maybe testing will improve, or understanding, like, I was telling someone else today, I was like, I honestly think because the hormones, they're just like, you really need a hormone like monitor, and
Like a
do
CS,
that for
like a
like,
continuous glucose. You need a continuous hormone tester. Yeah, I
yeah.
agree.
Yeah, that's what you need to look at, and I think that'll be more insightful. I mean, you never know where the research will lead. I mean, it'll be interesting to see even 3 years from now what we know. I feel like everything is just moving so fast, which is really hopeful, I feel like.
Well, in the 50s, you were diagnosed with hysteria. You were told you were given a manual orgasm and given some acid. That's how we used to treat perimenopause back
Or
in the
put in an insane asylum.
that one too. I prefer the acid and the manual orgasm personally, but yes, the mental asylum was the other option. Did you see the head plates that women used to have to wear if they disagreed with their husbands? Like this full-on metal thing that would wire the tongue shut.
Oh
Full
my good
on.
night.
We have come a long, long way. So you're to your point, you're right. Now that really, again, that perimenopause has now really been properly researched and we're looking at all the hormone stuff, I do think in the next 3 I actually wouldn't be surprised if we have things like a continuous glucose monitor that women in their mid-40s start wearing to really track where they are in the menopause, and then that will give feedback in exactly how you dose hormones. I think that probably is something with AI and our medical advancement the next 3 to 7 years, I think will be something, and I think will be very valuable.
Yeah, I think it'll be amazing. Um, One of the things, I don't know where we're headed next, but one of the things that I thought was, again, a really helpful thing, kind of going back to, I wasn't getting results exactly that I thought, but like you had done a lot of the baseline things
Mm,
that would typically balance hormones
of
out
course. Yeah.
if there was like other imbalanced stuff, like we talked, like stress management, because chronic
Hmm.
cortisol elevation suppresses progesterone, disrupts ovulation, those kind of things. Getting the healthy fats for hormone synthesis, your protein and micronutrients, especially like zinc, which is again another issue for a lot of CKD patients because that
Yeah.
just seems to get peed out at early stages. But magnesium, B6 is another. That's like the only vitamin that I feel like his keeps coming up in the literature is like, yeah, people with kidney disease really do need more of that.
And it's
And
fascinating too. Are you getting this in Australia because companies put in B6 and not P5P? We've had toxicity everywhere. So all these people have got neurotoxicity from elevated B6. But crazily enough, I'm like, you're right. Everything I read, I'm like, in autoimmune, I'm like, we need B6 in there. So you have to be
yeah.
using P5P form. But it's been an outbreak in Australia. So I'm fighting against people that are quite scared to put in B6. I'm like, but we really need it. Have you had that in America, or has that just been an Australian thing?
In America, I feel like as far as kidney vitamins go, everyone is like freaked out about giving people too much. So we haven't had that problem yet.
Okay.
Um,
Sorry.
but
A
yeah,
change of heart.
no. But I mean, that's an important thing to consider. But I just feel like you've done all the things of get the protein
Yes.
right, get the micronutrients right, support the liver to help metabolize, the estrogen, support the gut, get moving, take out the toxins, those kind of stuff. Like you've done those things. And so if things like normalized and improved, then you wouldn't be thinking about hormone replacement therapy. But you did all those things, and then you were still thinking, we need something else, so hormone replacement therapy.
Yeah, oh,
So that's
absolutely. All
really
the
key.
baseline stuff. Yeah, and thank you for saying that. Yes, all the baseline stuff, especially sleep, trying to get women to sleep during that time. I'm like, why can't I get their sleep and get, 'cause, I'm
Yeah.
tracking everything with things like auras. Like, I'm like, why can't I get the deep sleep high enough, which is where they're
Hmm.
going to do all their repair. Parkinson's, I want them to have enough REM, so there's yes, you're right, all of that stuff gets taken into consideration. And I am a practitioner where unless we're getting kind of 100% resolvement, I don't believe anything's incurable. So unless we're sort of really working into those realms, then I've missed something. So
Yeah.
hormone and hormone replacement has become a much bigger part, and working with these amazing doctors has become a bigger part of my practice. And it's been nice because I'm getting the results that I wasn't able to get before with putting in seed cycling and all the things that we might try before, and herbs and things like that. And like I say, anyone, and this, Lindsay, anyone with an autoimmune disease, it's already tough enough. Then you put perimenopause on top of it. If you can just fix that and help women not to feel so darn insane, like that in itself is a good job, because suffering might be the wrong word, but it's already tough enough to manage autoimmunity, and then you want to
Yeah.
manage estrogen going completely out the window on top of that. Like, I just feel like that's not fair for any woman to have to go through that when we've got options like hormone replacement therapy. So I will utilize it. So, and it's been good. Like I say, we've a lot of my patients are starting to get some pretty good stabilization in not just their mood and all the stuff that comes with perimenopause, but their symptoms. So to your point, just how much that those hormone fluctuations and changes in hormones maybe were driving some of the immune system and things like that. So it's been
Yeah.
important.
It's very true.
Yeah. So what else do you want to say anything else with hormones, particularly, estrogen, progesterone, and kidney disease? Is there any big bow you want to put around that? Because it's really interesting to hear you say, and that, and someone actually asked me this question the other day, that during dialysis, people that were put on testosterone, men during dialysis, just gave them better quality of life and things like that. And I was really impressed that your dialysis unit did that. I'm not convinced every dialysis unit does that. Is there anything that you've seen, like I'm seeing with these perimenopausal autoimmune patients, that when we do put in hormones or look at that, or at least put that piece in with kidney disease, are we seeing is there anything like that that you want to add, or why people really should be flagging hormones if they've got a chronic kidney disease that they may not have thought about that before, because it's not really part of the kidney conversation?
No, I think it's just, kind of like the thought process that I'm really, really happy to be seeing is that, you know, kidney disease affects the whole person, and that we need to really be looking at every single system and paying attention to that. And I think, as I think I mentioned this before we came on, or maybe at the beginning, of just as a patient not being like, oh, well, this is horrible and I'm suffering, but that's just the disease. And I do feel like it's challenging to have that hope that I could, maybe something could be done about this, because sometimes it just feels like such a crushing thing, like so many things layered on top, and you're just like, it's so hard to try and think, yeah, there's something that could be done about this. But I think, finding a provider who you can have open, honest conversations with and just say, hey, I just am feeling like this, and I really want to believe that this does not have to be like how my life is. I want something better than this, and find a provider who's willing to just think outside the box and look at all the possible pieces of what kind of things impact our health. And like you said, estrogen and progesterone, that's not a typical kidney piece. Like, it's something that, usually we've got other fish frying, so we're not looking at that. But after looking through this, I'm like, that's a piece that we really need to look at. And as a dietitian, obviously, I'm not able to prescribe any hormone replacement therapy, but it's something that, I can say, hello, patient, maybe talk with your doctor about this. And I think, like you said before, like, close monitoring of symptoms and, different hormone levels, and, giving things a trial and saying, we should see some different results by X amount of time. And if we don't, we know, hey, this is probably not really the right thing. But if you can, and I feel like that's with a lot of interventions, because there's so much we don't understand. Should be like, let's try this out for a reasonable amount of time. And then let's circle back and revisit and say, is this helping? Maybe it's helping in different ways than we thought, or maybe it's helping exactly as we thought, or maybe it's not doing anything. Then you can move on to the next thing. But I think have that hope that, you know, all of your symptoms may not just be the disease, that there is legitimately something that can be done.
Yeah, I think that's a big thing. It's really easy. You haven't been someone with MS, it's been anything gets, I'm like, I break my little finger. Oh, that's because you've got MS. Really? I don't think so. Like it's really, and I know that happens to kidney disease too. So it's like, no, like we need to treat you as a whole person, not just a disease. And we can't be blaming everything on the fact that you've got kidney disease. We need to make sure that everything else is optimized. So then that frees up. And that's the other thing I'll say about hormones, is that when you really optimize hormones, they take so much energy because they're such big, like, you use the word soup, and it's exactly right. They're a big soup. That the more symphony and the calmer the waters, if you think about menopause or anything like that, of these kind of crazy waves, you can't get a boat to sail nice and calmly across the top. But anything you can do to calm the crazy soup that is hormones, you free up energy for the body to heal, because it's not moving these hormones around. And that's been definitely my experience with autoimmunity. I've got a spinal cord injury as well, and one of the things they suggested was putting in low dose testosterone and hormones, because it would free energy up for my body because it's very hard to get a spinal cord to heal. It's like the last thing that happens. And so they wanted everything else. And when I say they, these are my amazing team of US doctors. They wanted everything else just so calm and optimized that the body was like, well, we've got nothing else to do, so why don't we actually look at
Yeah.
healing the spinal cord? That was their reasoning, and it's been amazing, you know, like I'm like, that makes so much sense to me, that you would just try and optimize everything else to hand off energy to the body to heal something that it's got no attention on healing my spinal cord issue, because it's got autoimmune disease and other bits flying around. Same kidney disease, you know, like if you've got other things that the body thinks is a priority, if you can try and calm everything, then at least you can get your body's focus and energy back on healing the kidneys, because that takes a lot of energy. They've got so many tiny little blood vessels going through there and things like that, a bit like a spinal cord, they're harder to heal. And so if you can calm everything else down, you've got a much better chance of getting the energy where you need it to go. So I think that's my big reason that we really need to be looking at hormones far more than we probably ever have as practitioners when we're dealing with people with kidney disease.
Yeah, I agree. There's so much we don't understand about the body still, that I feel like the smartest thing that we can do is say, well, what can we do to give the body what it needs to do its thing?
Exactly.
And that way, you know, we can learn more from it and see better outcomes. And yeah, I just feel like, I don't know, it's so much more of a rewarding way to help people, right? So
100%. Yeah, that's a very good point. Well, this has been great, Lindsay. Anything else you want to add before we wrap up hormones, the female hormones, progesterone, estrogen, and chronic kidney disease?
well, I don't know where all we went, but we went a lot of fun places, and I think we can we'll just leave it at that for now.
Sounds good. If you want to know more about what Lindsay does, I'll put her details below. But she's at Kidney Institute. Kidney. Can't speak anymore. It made me laugh. KidneyNutritionalInstitute.org. I'll put her details in below. She works with people all over the US and all over the world because of the wonders of telehealth. If you've got insurance in the US, you'll be able to work with Lindsay through that as well. I know you guys have got an intake coming up for polycystic kidney in January, I think. Is that your next intake?
Um, I gotta look and see what we're,
Jess has given me
yeah,
the details, but they've got some
yeah,
great resources on there. So if you go onto the website and have a look,
yeah.
you'll find all of that information there. If you want to know more about what we do, head to www.kidneycoach.com. You'll find all our supplements and products there as well under the shop. If you want to read articles, go and have a look at our article page, and make sure you hit like and subscribe. That way you'll get notified anytime we put up more content. As always, Lindsay, thank you. How do you feel about talking about oxytocin next?
Ooh, that would
I
be a fun
know.
one to
That's
explore.
what I thought, a little left of field, but I feel like
Yeah,
this. I was just looking at some cool research on oxytocin. I'm like, let's talk about that. The love
fair
hormone.
enough.
All
Okay,
right.
we'll check it out.
We'll be back next to talk about oxytocin. Lindsay, as always, thank you for being your fabulous, amazing self. And for everyone watching, thank you for being part of our community. We hope you find this useful. We look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.
Bye.